Hey everybody, Alex here, and welcome to another video. Finally, the fourth entry in the Cold Steel series from Trails in the Sky. Trails in the Sky, Cold Steel, the quadrology is finally finished. Coming in at just about 70 hours on the 40th. Wow, Alex, I need more of those. Coming in about 70 hours and change to finish the fourth entry. And I have to say, this has been quite a journey, trying to knock out an entire game series from 2, 3, and 4 in less than a year. Um, I think it was really enjoyable, but I also think it was very exhausting to an extent. And I really do think that has to come from, I guess you could say, kind of like a storytelling perspective. And, pardon the environment. I'm doing this early morning, and I've been trying to film this for a few days. And I just want to get it out at this point. And when I say it's a little bit exhausting, I mean, coming off of the second entry, which really wraps up everything that started in the original Cold Steel game. Just left me on such like a high point to where I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to do this. Going into Cold Steel 3, it's the same characters a little bit later, and it's basically, I don't want to say a new story, but it's like a continuation of the story. You could have ended on 2, but there's obviously more. If you go into 3 and 4, you're getting that closure. That's really what this part of it is. And 3 ended on such a somber note for me. It was kind of like one of those things where I was like, I even mentioned in the video, I was kind of put off that they refer to it as a tragic fairy tale. And let's see how it ends. In the fourth game, they kind of explain why they say it like that. And in the grand scheme of things, I'm like, okay, cool. That the way they ended the third one, that's how it should have ended then. Like, I'm totally on board with that. But the fourth one really falls into, this is going to sound a little review-ish to start, just so you're aware. The fourth one really falls into, I guess you could say, like, this problem I personally have with Falcom games, is that there's just too fucking much going on. They reference a lot of events that unfortunately we don't have in the States, or we didn't know about in the States as of 2022, 2023, and I think 2024. That won't be a problem anymore. In case you're under a rock, the missing games and some new games are going to be coming out over here. That being said, any fan translation work through Geofront has been taken down, as they are assisting NIS in bringing these out, which is phenomenal. And I really wish more companies would take that sort of approach. I know Xseed has always been up on it with working, like, I think they've worked with Durante a few times with the PC ports. I know NIS has too. But I do wish, if there's a fan translation out there and these guys really took the time, pro bono, pay them for it. I have no problem with that. If they say, listen, we took it down because you're going to get a full retail release, beautiful. Like, to me, that is the best thing you could ever have. And playing this game knowing that this was going on in the background was a big motivating factor, because while this game was really fun and enjoyable, it unfortunately really relies on your prior knowledge of those games. You can look it up. We live in the age where I have this stupid thing sitting next to me all the time just to look stuff up. It's all readily available, but it's not the same. It's kind of, and it's dropped so casually, and I don't know if that's just in nature of the text or the translation, but it's like, oh yeah, and then this thing and this thing and this thing, and I'm like, holy fuck, that happened 10 years ago. It reached a point where honestly I wish, kind of like how visual novels will highlight words that you can look up in a glossary in case you don't know what they mean, or it's referencing something in the lore. I really wish this game had something like that, like a quick tooltip, specifically for this fourth game, because it is really tying everything together from the Crossbell duology and Trails in the Sky. Because there are, maybe a spoiler, but it shows up in the beginning. You do get Estelle, you do get Joshua, you do get Lloyd, you do get Ellie, you do get Tio, who, by the way, I fell in love with using her in this game, and unfortunately, I'm sorry to report, you don't get to use those guys as much as you hope. You get to use Randy a bit more, which is great. But for everybody else, I was just like, I had the dream team in my head the entire time, and the game just teases you with it throughout 85% of it. That was a little annoying. But in terms of the story, this really does take an interesting turn. Slight spoiler here. You really don't play as Reen for a vast majority of the beginning, and that's explained at the conclusion of the third game. And I honestly think it's better for that. It's no space, love, magic. Everything is fixed, and everything's good to go. Um, you're kind of left in an area where you don't know what's going on with Reen, and they really put the spotlight on the new Class 7 kids. Yuna, who I mentioned in the last video, I love her character. I think she's phenomenal. She really takes a leadership role for the first half of this game, which to me I think was great. Considering she idolizes Reen and Lloyd, who are both the leaders of their respective games. You also get some closure on the whole Muse thing. Muse is a character that joins your party. You get some closure on that, and ultimately it really made me think, like, okay, I can't really say it because I know it's going to be a spoiler, but if you know me, there's a particular anime I really like that's all about mind fucking, and this reminded me a lot of it just based on strategy alone. All the better for it, I think. But the thing I had the most difficulty understanding was, despite all of this planning and strategy and everything else, all of the supporting characters lost their backbone. Basically, if I could just be vague, here's a massive plan. I don't really agree with it, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to stand in your way, as opposed to taking a knee and letting you do what I think is the right thing because you have some sense of fucking duty. And this is coming from characters who I had tremendous respect for throughout the first, second, and third game. You may be able to piece out who this is. Towards the end, this particular individual says something, and I was just kind of like, who the fuck are you, and where is so-and-so? I was just totally put off by it. Characters that you had previously presumed to be incredibly stupid powerful continue to be so. You beat them in these encounters several times throughout the game, and then it's not a big deal. Everybody's buddies at the end. It was just like, oh, I was just testing your strength. I'm like, really? Are you fucking kidding me? We've been doing this for 4 games. Do you really need to test it anymore? There was some boss fights I will say were required. The McBurn ones definitely were. And even that one towards the end, like people were telling me it's very difficult, and it wasn't. But it left me pissed off because it still didn't explain anything. And there's more games coming, but I think it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, there's going to be more. I'm definitely going to play them. I have no problems with that. But it's like I have to wait until 22, 23, 24, 25, and beyond. That's my own personal problem. But some of these boss fights, particularly in the last dungeon, I was just kind of like, why? Like, I just did not understand the purpose of them having a fight with you. From an ethical standpoint, they're not against you at all, but they kind of sort of have to be. It made no sense. And that's really where it comes down to with this game, I guess, for me, is as great as the closure is, there are so many fights in this with so many different supporting characters, returning characters, antagonists, protagonists, or heroes and heroines to an extent, that I really just feel are there just for the sake of satisfying the fans. Only because I'm like, they're like, I have to test you. Okay, so the last 3 games and 100+ hours-ish, depending, each, and doing this, and this in the Infernal Castle, apparently doesn't mean that I'm strong enough just to take your ass out. Apparently, I guess. I get it in terms of a gameplay perspective. From a story perspective, it just started to feel like padding. I'll be completely honest. Some of the boss fights I just thought were pointless. And even the ones that did have a purpose, honestly, once you figure out your ordnance, and I personally value speed in mine, and evasion, it just becomes dumb easy, and some of the fights just become trivial. The order system has definitely been expanded, which I would say is a positive because there's more customization, but it's also a negative because it's very easy to break some of these boss fights, particularly with Black Tortoise formation, as opposed to not even for the damage reduction, just using that in place of a healer, and just going to town as quickly as you can. That worked for, who did that work for? That worked for one Campanella fight. Who Campanella fought with somebody, I'm not going to spoil who, but I had no healer that whole fight. I literally just did Black Tortoise formation every time I had one BP, and that was for the purposes of just healing people. And then just doing Ash is one which gets your critical hit rate up, and just doing that just to make sure I always had a stock of BP. And it worked. It absolutely worked, and it was broken, and I just milked that for most of the game. But that's where this game also shines. Even though you don't get, or I didn't get the characters I wanted quickly enough, sure enough, when you do get to play as them, it is so satisfying. It's like old friends. Really, if you played Trails in the Sky, they are old friends. One person's missing. Not gonna say who, but one person's missing. And then this individual shows up in the ending, and I was like, son of a bitch, because this guy kept me alive for most of the second chapter, to be completely honest. Moving fucking tank. Anyway, overall, I think, as I'm saying, I really did enjoy this whole exercise, but I think finally finishing 4, and this is where it's a little strange for me. You know, I'm harping on it as a lot of padding, a lot of filler in the boss department. I'm complaining about the fact that there's so much reference going on. It's 4 games, but it's technically 7. Actually, it's more like 9, maybe even 10. I don't know. There's 9 I know about. And watch, one day they'll eventually just say, oh, and Ease is in the same world apparently too, and that'll just fuck everybody up. Despite all this, I have to say, in terms of the 4 games, it's not my favorite. I completely get the closure thing. They're trying to button up as much as they can, but leave enough open for interpretation for the next batch of games. But I gotta give it, I think out of all of them, 2 is still my favorite. I think 2 really just captured that high school thing and put it in a situation that made no fucking sense. I got Gurren Lagann vibes. I love the fact that it was really just the kids just going around in an airship just doing all this stuff. It was like total, it reminded me almost of like that era of RPGs where everybody wanted to be, or every game had a sky pirate. You know, we had what was it? Grandia 3, which admittedly isn't that good. We had Skies of Arcadia. We even had Final Fantasy 12 with Balthier. And just seeing that, it gave me such a sense of nostalgia. And the fact that, you know, everybody had a particular role. Toa is like the lady, you know, she's just running the whole thing. And it's kind of like they look at Alphen and they're just like, oh, are you cool with this? And she's like, do it. Like, and it was just so, like, the dynamic was so much fun. And in this game, they recreate that and they make it epic and they make it exciting and they make it satisfying. But here's the thing. It's not Alphen calling the shots anymore. It's somebody else. And that person who calls the shots knows everything, has predicted everything, and doesn't really give you that sense of where Toa was like, this is the plan, dot, 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 dot. We have to keep an eye out for dot, 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 dot. This other person is one of my favorite characters in the whole series, is fucking intelligent beyond and knows everything's going to work without even revealing it. And you can see it in the pure confidence. And the referential stuff that goes in with this individual from previous games is satisfying because it was so, what's the word I want? Nonchalant. There's a particular, we'll say, item that's just referenced a couple of times. It's mentioned, it's used. It apparently has a much greater purpose. And truthfully, just me trying to read between the lines, they knew the entire time. And it's just, once again, another manipulation, and it is fucking brilliant. But I miss Toa calling the shots. I for whatever reason, Toa is one of my favorite characters, and I honestly think she's probably one of the best characters who doesn't get to fight, or rarely does. Because she's on top of everything, and even in the private events you get to share, private events, was it Star Ocean? You really see the self-doubt. You really see the wanting to do better and wanting to do the best for, I think it's her grandparents. And, you know, she's exhausted all the time. And, you know, you really get a touch of that in the private moments in this game. But here's the thing with them. they're just tossed in. Like it was almost as everybody wins if you can interpret that a particular way. Um, and it's good for the closure. Like they're purely there for closure. It's purely there for the purpose of whoever you've been romancing or want to romance or see what's going on. They're there for you, but they're just kind of, to me personally, they were just tossed in. The cutscenes themselves, I think, are way better than they have been in any of the other games, but they also didn't give me that same sense of, oh cool, I have bonding points, let's see who's available. Ooh, cool, okay, Alicia's available, I'll go see her. Oh no, but wait, I only have two, but Fee is available and Sarah's available, I kind of want to see what's going on with them. And you really had to pick which one you wanted to go with this. It's like, okay, you have three. Oh, you did the optional monster hunt, cool, now you have four, and now you can see everybody. And it kind of took the fun out of it. And personally for me, I always went with the ladies because those, besides Ash, I think has some of the best character development, but the ladies tended to have more, we'll say, substance to it. Sarah, I love her character. I love like the evolution that she goes through and kind of like the mutual understanding she has with Rean, despite the sexual tension being a little strange. I love the whole aesthetic with Fee, the whole background with her going in with her parents, let's say. And then Laura, who the one particular cutscene she shares with Reem where they're training, I thought was probably like one of the cutest things, and only Laura could pull that off. It was something only Laura could do. Um, Elisa has always been my romance interest in these games. I tend to go canon. But here's the thing, though, and this is, I don't know if it's just a transfer thing or what. The cutscenes, basically every time you try to romance somebody, it's almost as she's like, oh yeah, this was great, I'm so glad we got to spend a moment. Never mind, I've had this moment three other times before. I get it, they have to keep it vague, but for all the interpretation and transferring of save data, you would think they would have tossed in a little bit something extra on that standpoint, because I've just stuck with her the whole time. And it's kind of crazy because as the games have gone on, particularly in this one, I used her less and less in my party. Muse really took over her as kind of like a utility glass cannon character, while I was previously using Alyssa as a support glass cannon character. Um, and I think Muse I didn't really like in the third game, and I really enjoyed her in this game. I think that's really one of the biggest benefits about these games. Like you can have your set party, but every game I was able to intermingle somebody that I really didn't use in the first place. First game I didn't really use Emma. I always used Lloyd. Not Lloyd. The violin kid. What the hell's his name? Jesus. Elliot. I always used Elliot. Second game I started to use Emma a lot more. Third game I started to use a bit more of a combination of Machias and Elliot, and then the fourth game I went right back to Emma. And for all you Machias haters, dude, you just do the time barrier break over and over again. You just get constant turns. It's wonderful. But coming off of all this, now we're getting to the praise part. I think this ending, well, rather the normal ending, is a load of horse shit. And there should have been no bullshit to get a true ending in the first place. They should have just had you do what you had to do and just give you the true ending. The normal ending is abrupt. It's not satisfying at all. And for those of you who know I hate it, it's bullshit. It's nonsense. Their true ending, I'll be honest, is a little bit of space love magic, which drives me nuts. But this was actually good space love magic because they explain it, as opposed to say, well, he was sleeping, and that's it. This, they actually give you a little bit of a background to how this happens. And it's a very anime thing. Something that happened back in episode 12, we'll say, is apparently important and nobody thought about it. And if you finish the game in the with the normal ending, presumably, it actually just tells you, actually, there's a true ending. If you go back in the game, you can just go to it immediately. So why not just let it be the standard, I guess? I guess keeping with tradition. But once you get all that, you fight the final boss, which was easy but incredibly satisfying and amazing. You get your ending. And I will say, this ending, admittedly, it's not, I won't say it's the best ending I've ever seen, but it was the most satisfying ending. Because watching the ending credits with the key artwork, with a particular event, a happy event, I'm not going to go into it, I was seeing all these characters and I was thinking back, man, I started playing these games, this series of games, when I was on YouTube, which I started YouTube originally in 2011. So I probably didn't play Trails in the Sky first chapter until maybe, we'll say 2012, 2013. We are talking roughly 10 years to get this moment. And it choked me up. I was like, holy shit. Mind you, I hated the third. And the second chapter, it drove me crazy. But I was thinking, like, it's so good to see all these characters again. That was the fun part for me. Even one character, I was like, where's he at? He's in the ending. He's literally standing there, and he looks confused as fuck. And it's amazing because that's his character, confused as fuck. But I teared up. I was like, I can't believe it. I have literally played 7 of these games, and I'm missing 2, presumably 3. 7 to get to this particular moment. That is incredible. No series I can think of has done something like that for me. Final Fantasy may have way more entries, well, let's say overall, but even in the grand scheme of the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy, to me they all felt each one is a different experiment. This game has one consistent narrative that I have no doubt was written in its entirety years ago, but it was probably written, and they basically brainstormed, like, okay, if we take it this way, we can go with this. But what about what's going on over here at the same time? These countries, just because one country has a bunch of bullshit going on, there has to be something going on this side of the continent. And they created this intricate web. And when you see this final cutscene, you see basically the web just comes together. And it's amazing and it's incredible. But that being said, that's also the biggest downfall that I personally have with this series, is because it's so big. You have to constantly reference other things. If you're not on the up and up and you haven't kept up with all these games and you're coming into Cold Steel 4, let's say, without playing any of the other ones, you're not going to be able to keep up. It's so nonchalant with the way they reference things. The Yakuza series, I personally always tell everybody, if you're going to start with any of them, start at the beginning. If you have no choice, start with 3 because the synopsis of 1 and 2 is actually really good. And then you can just pick up from there. But that's like literally 45 minutes worth of cutscenes. There is a huge batch of political intrigue, military, characters, betrayals, acceptances, mercenaries, Jaegers, Red Constellation, Zephyr, Ouroboros, Enforcer this, Enforcer. There's too much. Even if they were able to do that, it's impossible. You would need to watch a lot of YouTube videos if you just want to jump into this and see what the fuck is going on. But I am, at the same time, I am happy that this little experiment is over because at this point, I think I am RPG'd out. Having literally put in over 200 hours into one game series in a year is a lot. And everybody even said, man, you finish these games fast, because I read fast and I use the speed up mechanic constantly. And unless it's something dramatic, I tend to skip all the S-Craft animations too. So I shave off a few seconds there. But, this was exhausting. It's incredibly rewarding, but it's exhausting. I don't know if I would ever do something like this again. I think it's really in my best interest to stay up to date, to say the least. But the big benefit of it is I was able to go off of 2 into 3 and go, okay, yeah, I remember all that. Go from 3 into 4 and go, oh yeah, I remember all that too. But they still reference back to Cold Steel 1 and they go back to Cold Steel 2. So I'm like, fuck, I'm in the same situation again. It's just too referential. It's too big. But it's an amazing series, guys. I think that's the long and short of it. But out of all of them, 2 just holds a special place in my heart. That ending, that really drove an emotional response for me. 1 was all right. 3 left me confused and angry, but I'll tell you, 4, it leaves you feeling so good inside. Well, the camera cut off in my big finish, but basically what I was going to say is, 1 left you on a cliffhanger, 2 drove an emotional response for me, 3 left me angry, but 4 left me with complete satisfaction. And I think from a storytelling perspective, that's the best way you could possibly do it. Anyway, I've been Alex, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take it easy.